Welcome to Learning and Teaching Systemic Therapy Podcast, the official Society for the Teaching of Marriage and Family Therapy, STMFT in short, podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Sofia Georgiadou. I created STMFT in this podcast as an antidote to the isolation I experienced as an early career academic. I also created STMFT in this podcast as a space to allow myself and my colleagues to share resources and bridge the way we do systemic therapy with the way we teach systemic therapy in our classrooms. Today, I have an amazing discussion lined up for you about deliberate practice. If you ever found yourself thinking, I sense that my students know the theory, but they still freeze up in the room, or when we do role plays, then this episode is for you. Deliberate practice, in my experience as a supporter, is not about rehearsing what you're already good at. It's about stepping into the discomfort of practicing a skill over and over again, targeting your growth edges, and sharpening your skills as a therapist, one micro skill at a time. So it's like taking your clinical skills to the gym with a purpose. Today's guests are going to break down for us how deliberate practice brings clarity, confidence, and precision into your teaching, your supervision, and your clinical practice. We have two amazing clinicians and educators with us, as well as a master's level student, all from Sentio University's MFT program. So grab your coffee, take a breath, and join us as we explore how deliberate practice is transforming the way we teach and experience systemic therapy. Here with us today, we have Dr. Tony Rousmaniere. He's the president of Sentio University and the executive director of the Sentio Counseling Center. He's also a past president of the psychotherapy division of the American Psychological Association and the author of over 20 books on deliberate practice and psychotherapy training, including the book series, The Essentials of Deliberate Practice. In 2017, he published the widely cited article in the Atlantic Monthly, What Your Therapist Doesn't Know. Dr. Rousmaniere supports the open data movement towards making clinical outcome data available to consumers, policymakers, and researchers by publishing his clinical outcome data on his website. He's a licensed psychologist in the state of California and Washington. Welcome.
Thank you, Sophia. It's great to be here.
Fantastic. I'm so glad you're here, Tony. Next up, we have Rocky Allemandi. He's a licensed marriage and family therapist in California and a certified deliberate practice supervisor through the International Deliberate Practice Society. He currently holds the position of program manager for Santa Cruz County Children's Behavioral Health and serves as adjunct faculty in the marriage and family therapy program at Sentio University. Rocky brings extensive experience within the public mental health system, having served in various capacities, including clinician, clinical supervisor, and program manager positions. He's strongly committed to the advancement of high-quality mental health care, and he's dedicated to the training and professional development of emerging clinicians, with an emphasis on compassionate, accessible, and evidence-informed service delivery. Welcome, Rocky.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. And finally, last but not least, we have Olivia Ng. She's a 20-year-old graduate student at Sentio University. She was born and raised in the Bay Area. She has spent the past 5 years living in Southern California. Her experience at Sentio University has given her a deeper understanding of the global psychology community, and she feels honored to be part of it. Olivia earned her bachelor's degree in psychology from Chapman University in May of last year. Prior to Sentio University's official launch, she participated in a short internship with the institution, and during that time, she was introduced to the concept of deliberate practice, which sparked curiosity and made her realize what sets Sentio apart from other programs. At the conclusion of the internship, she was offered the opportunity to join Sentio as a student and enrolled immediately following her undergraduate studies. Welcome, Olivia. Thank you for being here.
Hi, thank you, Sophia.
All right, so we'll be exploring some questions about deliberate practice today and how it can be integrated in MFT training. And we will also discuss Sentio University's clinic to classroom or C2C method of teaching. So let's dive into our first question. This one is for Tony and Rocky. I would love to know a little bit more about the clinic to classroom method and how would you describe it in your own words. The way I understand it, it's about bringing real clinical work, recordings from your work with clients back into the classroom so you can process what's happening.
I can describe it in theory, and then Rocky, you can describe it in practice since you've been actually doing it. I would go all the way back to my own graduate training, where I noticed that my knowledge of psychotherapy, including systemic therapies, was growing pretty rapidly. I got really good at reading about therapy, writing about therapy, talking about therapy. You could hear me debate what's better, CBT, psychodynamic, and you could be tempted to think that I was actually a pretty good therapist until you saw the videos of me actually working with clients. And what you notice was a huge disconnect between my cognitive knowledge about therapy that was growing very quickly and my procedural ability to perform therapy that was growing very slowly, or sometimes felt like it wasn't growing at all, especially as measured in client outcomes. This has been an issue that's been acknowledged across the field for decades. My mentor, Rodney Goodyear, did his dissertation on this 50 years ago, where they found that the amount of cognitive knowledge, the book knowledge that we learn about therapy does not translate automatically into improved therapy skills. And so our whole goal with the clinics to classroom and Sentio in general is to narrow the gap between cognitive knowledge about therapy and the ability to perform it. Rocky, you want to try describing what it's like?
Yeah, I think it's really exciting to be able to see your students bring in a videotape of them practicing the skill or using the skill, not even practicing, using it with their clients, and then helping them find their growing edges. Oftentimes, it's quite a bit different than what you might have prepared. You might have your lecture on this topic, and this is what you're focusing on. And then when your student is bringing in the video, you'll actually identify a different skill that needs practice. We're really working with our students right at their growing edge in development, which is exciting. And as faculty, also, you've got to really be able to think on your toes, right? Identify the clinical challenge and develop an exercise on the spot to practice that skill.
Go ahead.
I realized I didn't totally describe how it works. The basic theory and how it works, basic model for every class after students start seeing clients in their second semester. So they start the practicum in the second semester.
Wow.
And for every class meeting for them from then on, for the whole rest of the graduate program, every student prepares a case that includes a video with bookmarks. All our sessions are automatically videotaped. Includes a session with bookmarks and brings a prepared case to every class. Most students in traditional graduate school education might show 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 videos a semester, or
Right.
maybe even in their entire graduate training. Our very courageous students, including Olivia right here. And by the way, thank you for inviting both Rocky's faculty, Olivia's students to this podcast. It's great to have a systemic perspective. And I'm very curious to hear what Olivia is going to say. Our students, God bless them, are prepared to show 5, actually plus up to 7 videos a week.
Wow.
Is that right, Olivia? You're doing 7 soup prep forums a week?
Yeah, I think that's
A week.
I'm assuming they don't necessarily go through all of them in every class, though, right?
No, there isn't
I
time
don't
to
know
go
how
through
many,
all of them.
but you're
Yeah.
preparing nonetheless to potentially process part of your session, maybe somewhere where you had a clinical challenge, right? A particular spot in the session where you felt like you were stuck or not sure.
And so for Olivia, on a given week, how many videos of yourself do you usually see, including supervision and class and everything?
of myself. It can go up to 3, but it's usually around 2.
Per week? And then of your peers?
Wow. Today we had a class and we actually saw 2 different students. Every day we see
Okay. And so by the time Olivia graduates, she will have seen approximately 10 million videos of herself and her peers doing therapy. We ask them to prepare videos of challenging cases too. So we're trying to focus on the cases where they need the most help.
I'm wondering, do you also share cases? Like, do you celebrate? Oh, I did this so good, this skill. I have to show you. Or does it never happen? Is it always about the growth edges?
Olivia, do you ever?
Yeah, I think it was something that when they introduced, this is what you're meant to do, I was kind of invited to do that. But I find that for the most part, people want to come in with the things that are really challenging. Every once in a while, I'll fill out a prep form and I'm thinking, wow, I just did really good this session. And then we don't get around to it. And we talk about this case, and it turns out to be a really important case that comes up that everyone benefits from. So I think there's room for it. But I think if you offered the two options, everyone's going to take the pill where we're looking at something challenging and talking about it because, it helps a lot just to get such a wide variety of different cases. We only have the clients that we have, but by having the class structured this way, you actually have access to seeing upwards of 20 additional different types of clients. So even if I'm
Mm.
a client that has XYZ, I can see someone else bring that client in and learn from that.
And this question comes up with our supervisors a lot because we do supervisor training on how to do deliberate practice supervision. We find that supervisors and faculty start by veering towards like, oh, you did great with this, you did so well, you did so great. And we find that actually students really want quite the opposite. And maybe Rocky, because Rocky has been both a supervisor and faculty for us. Can you speak to that from personal experience?
Absolutely. I did 2 years of training with Tony and Alex for the deliberate practice supervisor training, where that was 2 years where every week Alex watched my clinical supervision videos with one or two supervisees, and then in a group format gave me feedback and showed videos of my work. There's really this parallel process that we're not asking our students to do anything that we're not doing, and then getting that very specific coaching. One of my growing edges was to give very clear corrective feedback to our students. That was really powerful. Our students or trainees were really responsive to that. I think about one trainee where we were practicing risk assessment and really practicing asking direct questions about suicide, about risk factors. And then I was able to see a video of them the following week where they're like, I did it. And we watched it and we were able to celebrate that huge success and then tweak it just a little bit, right? Like, oh, that's great, super solid. Let's improve it this way. Let's try it being able to ask that question another way. Let's not have a pause there. We were able to really
Okay.
fine tune it.
I'm hearing some sandwich feedback going on. Is that what you did well, what you could improve, good job on XYZ, or are we going straight into corrective feedback?
I don't think we always need the sandwich. One huge strength is that our students have consented to being part of a program, like a very rigorous and intensive program where they're asking for and will be receiving feedback regularly.
Often we skip the bread and we go straight to the meat. On our website, we list 10 reasons why Sentio may not be the right graduate program for you. As far as I know, we're the only graduate program in the world that tries to convince students to not apply. And we have all applicants include a deliberate practice video in their application, or like
Oh.
Olivia, have done a deliberate practice internship. So they know what they're getting into. We tend to have very motivated students who are okay getting direct feedback.
Wonderful. So that stage is already set from the beginning. My next question was about how do you build a climate of trust where people are vulnerable to show you, like, this is what I messed up or this is what I did wrong. It sounds like you're already setting up for that outcome from the beginning, like from the application and admission stage.
From the application, and even before the application, I've written articles that talk about my mistakes as a therapist. I've got videos on YouTube talking about my mistake. I showed the students a video. Olivia saw a video a few weeks ago of me doing a horrible session of therapy. It was really
Brutal.
bad. The client dropped out. It wasn't one of
Oh
these
my
like,
God.
oh, it all ended up for the best. And it was while I was a licensed therapist. It wasn't me as a trainee. I was trying to learn a
Yeah,
new model of therapy. I was focused on the model. I didn't focus on the client. And it
uh,
just, we're kind of modeling, we call it a failure facing culture, meaning we face our failures and we take the stigma out of the word failure and we say, this is how we learn.
I
Um,
love it. I love it. I want to ask Olivia about her internship before we continue on to the next. I'm curious, this is between undergrad and graduate school, right? So can you tell us what that looked like?
Yeah, I was actually in my senior year, my last. I wasn't sure when I wanted to do grad school, what kind of program I was looking for. And all my friends in STEM and in every other facet of major was, well, I'm looking for internships. So I started looking and I learned that's not how the world of psychology works. You don't look for pre-grad school internships. The internship is the practicum, and that's while you're a graduate.
Mm,
But a professor that I was reaching out to said, hey, this university, they're trying to get started and they're outreaching. They want people to join this internship and check it out. And I thought, okay, yeah, I'll check it out. And it was I think it was like 3 hours on Friday for like 4 weeks.
yeah, 4 weeks.
It was about 12 hours total. All we did was deliberate practice. And there was very brief introduction to it, but it mainly was like, let's just jump in, just do it. Don't think too much about it, just kind of do it. I think at the start of the internship, there was maybe 8 to 10 people. And towards the end, it was me and one other student that stuck it out. We were also the most responsive during the entire internship. I was confused, but still really intrigued. It's 12 hours. I want to maximize these 12 hours and see what I can get from it. Having done the deliberate practice and then learning about, oh, this university is going to start up and maybe there's an opportunity of doing this, I had a forward thinking mentality going into just applying because I knew exactly what we were going to be doing. And it was just getting the ball rolling with everything else. It was really interesting thing to do because this was not something that no one talks about it pretty much. This was the first I had ever heard of it, especially in undergrad. So it was really interesting to just learn about what it was, what it looked like, and that this was something that people can do as they're training and people can do it 20 years into being licensed. So that was pretty interesting.
okay. What a boot camp and a marketing plan at the same time. A
Yeah, and
twofer.
I mean, it's also our way of sussing out potential applicants. Like Olivia said, not everyone makes it through the internship,
Right.
and not everyone is up. It's up for this. It's harder than it has to be.
Okay. This brings me to my next question. Actually, I would love to know what type of resistance or challenges have you encountered from people, either fellow colleagues or students or supervisees who are unfamiliar with this type of deliberate practice, supervision, training? Could you share a little bit more about the challenges you faced from others, the feedback you got,
Yeah.
and the response to that?
Yeah, well, maybe I can describe some common concerns, and then Rocky and Olivia can describe what their experience has been. One common concern is that deliberate practice can be a reductionist approach to therapy because we focus a lot on micro skills and rehearsing micro skills many times. It typically takes a lot of repetitions to internalize a skill. We'll hear, oh, therapy is an art, it's subtle, it's nuanced, it's really kind of ineffable, and you're trying to reduce it into these Lego blocks, and then you're going to turn therapists into robots who will just be repeating what they memorized in practice. I'd be curious to hear Rocky and Olivia's take on that, having done it now for a while.
Yeah, I think one of the incredible things is teaching therapy skills. Folks are able to put their own spin on it, right? You're bringing who you are and learning this skill and meeting these skill criterias, and so many different ways about doing it, which are incredible. One thing that I found really powerful in my deliberate practice supervision and watching videotapes was sometimes the trainee would use skills in a way that I wouldn't use them, and the video showed that their outcomes were good and the client was responsive to their style. I had somebody who was much more directive than I would have been. And the video showed that this was working and matching for the client. And I watched I'm like, okay, they got that. That's different than how I would do it. But when we look at the tape, we can really see that this is effective and their symptoms are reducing. So that was really powerful.
It's kind of crazy having done the deliberate practice. The criteria are so specific, they're so redundant. And how do I know in session when I'm going to want to use it? Like, how am I really going to apply this? What is it going to feel like to sit there? And I think of it as having so many different clinical skills because we practice so many. So, and you're not remembering all of them, and you're not remembering all the criteria for all of them either, but doing so many different skills with so many different criteria that have so many different uses, you have this really useful structure, but not firm structure. It's like scaffolding, something you can grab onto in session. Someone will say something and it'll sound like a client statement from one of our exercises. That doesn't mean I remember what criteria and what the skill is called, but I have an idea of how I should be responding, what I should be looking for, what can I do to continue to move forward in this session. And it comes up at the randomest of times. I'll hear something from a client and a skill from one of the very first skills we ever did pops into my mind. I'll have something to say that I know is productive. And like Rocky was saying, after practicing it so many times, you also have your own style. So it doesn't feel awkward to use any of these skills. I think it is an art to be able to do therapy, be personable, be genuine and authentic, and do all of those things. But also having that scaffolding means that what I'm looking for is a lot different, and how I'm able to conceptualize clients is almost what I think is easier, hearing from people who haven't done deliberate practice, but I don't really know. This is all I know as a trainee. But it's kind of crazy because it feels like there is so much support that in session, I always have somewhere that I'm going. I love the variety of different clinical skills because they really are preparing you for every which thing. And hey, if this happens, this is what you could be looking for. There's just so much support doing clinic to classroom and looking at it in class. There's also a lot of support in seeing the variety of clients that we are seeing and actually sitting in session. I've only found it useful.
Can I ask a follow-up question to each of you, actually? You mentioned that when the time comes, you have practiced all of the skills, the client is in front of you, and there's a statement from the client, and you don't know exactly, oh, let me go to my library of skills and find the skill to respond to. It's almost like muscle memory, like your brain knows what to do and how to respond in that moment just from the rehearsal practice of it. Is that what's happening in your mind when you're with a client?
I'd say it's very similar to muscle memory. The part that's most exciting is that while it's muscle memory, it's not robotic. There's so much clinical thinking that goes along with all of the skills. The way the skills are taught, clinical thinking is folded into it. There is no being robotic, no regurgitation. In fact, if you tried to use the skills in session as a regurgitation or as a robot, it would not work. It just wouldn't work. You have to have kind of both. And the way that it's taught is so important. That's why it is so useful, is because it can be both. There's so much structure and muscle memory, but there's also instinct and critical thinking.
Yeah, and freedom also to be yourself or like be authentic in the room as a human being as well. Rocky, I wanted to ask you, you spoke about outcomes and you said I could tell from the outcome of the session if the skill was applied in a meaningful, effective way. When you say outcomes, are you talking about like the client response on tape? Are you talking about tracking outcomes after the
Yeah.
session?
We do both, getting to see the tape and how the client responds, but each client at the Sentio Counseling Center also fills out the OQ45 in advance of each session. So we can then see, is the client improving? Are they at risk for decompensating? Are there risk factors coming up? Each time we do a clinic to classroom or deliberate practice supervision, we review the outcomes together and just see like, what are the risk factors? What's the progress? Do you have a good conceptualization of the case and is it moving forward? Or will that maybe be a piece of our work together? Do we need to spend some time on that too?
Okay, I have not heard of the OQ45.
Think of it as a much larger outcome rating scale. The outcome rating scale was actually made to be a simpler version of the OQ45. I can bring up another concern that people have about deliberate practice. Another common one that I think has some legitimacy is that it takes time, it takes energy, it takes effort that could otherwise be spent reading about therapy, or for faculty, it takes time away from lecture, right?
Right.
For students, it takes time and energy away from writing papers and other traditional
Projects.
academics,
Yeah.
projects. And so I'd be
Mhm.
curious to hear Rocky and Olivia's take on that.
I'm sure Olivia is like, yay, no papers. All
There's
right.
still papers.
There's still papers?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think getting to do the deliberate practice piece is so crucial to it. I would love to have the full time to be able to lecture. I like that. And to be able to practice and really move from declarative knowledge to procedural knowledge, right? Not just have you write a paper about how to do therapy, but this is what it looks like and what it might look like with this kind of presentation. And getting to try it out in a pretty fun, right? We do some of these exercises as a group, as a whole class together, and then we have breakout groups. And then as the instructor, I'll jump into each Zoom breakout group and provide feedback and really be able to see people try it out. One of my favorite things is you can try different things and nobody's harmed from doing it. You could try all sorts of different ways about being empathetic or whatever your skill is that you're teaching. You also get to see your colleagues or your classmates do it regularly. You also get to see your instructor try it and make mistakes too. I'll make a mistake when I'm trying it and be like, oh, I didn't love that. Let's do it again.
Let's do it again. I think that's the motto, right? Is it on
That's
a
the
banner
unofficial
somewhere?
Yeah.
motto.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's another motto for Sentio, which is how can we make this harder?
How can we make this harder?
That's
Oh my
our
goodness.
other unofficial motto.
Olivia, what are your experiences of classroom assessments and time spent in class practicing versus doing other things?
Yeah, I think before you even start seeing clients, that's pretty much all you're doing is practicing and doing things over and over again as homework. I think for our very first trimester, before we saw clients, it was really about meeting up with cohort mates outside of class, filming yourself with another student. So you don't even have an instructor coming in. Then we're sitting there like, are we doing this right? We can ask about it next class. You're given so many opportunities to do it, quote unquote, the right way and also the wrong way, kind of like Rocky was saying, and figuring out how you're going to deliver empathy, all those other things. Doing the other classwork folds deliberate practice into it. So you're able to merge all of the experiences together. So you're not just doing all the practice and then moving on from it. It's like bring that skill back in. Let's talk about that. And so you're getting more exposure to that, continuing to apply it, continuing to figure out. And everything is just so experiential. It all kind of makes sense. And even our final exams is pretty much just doing more deliberate practice with certain skills. And that's interesting because we're always, all of the cohort mates, which ones are they going to focus on? Because that tends to be an indicator of what's the focus of this trimester. What are some things that are really important takeaways? Some of the skills really stand out and tackle things that you wouldn't expect. Complex client suggestions is one of them, and things like that I would never think of. And it feels so relieving almost to have somewhere to go with that. If a client makes a request that's just really unreasonable, there's an art. That's why therapy is an art, because there's an art to rejection, there's an art to saying no, there's an art to doing all of these things that are interpersonally perceived as negative. And being able to practice doing that means that when you're sitting in session, you have the chance to save a therapeutic alliance rather than break the bond. Sometimes there is a right and wrong response. So what is the right way to go about this so that I continue to learn doing things that way? That's what makes it feel so supportive. And it doesn't bother me to have all the other readings and stuff built into it, because that's school. There's the experiential part and then there's the school part, and they fit well together.
Yeah, just
Yeah, go
clarify
ahead,
one
Tony.
thing,
Yeah.
because listeners might think that we're just talking about clinical skills. And quite the contrary. Literally every topic that we teach at Sentio, we have deliberate practice exercises to solidify the students' ability to perform. For example, Rocky taught our class on legal and ethical issues in marriage and family therapy, which is typically going through the laws, the regulations, the ethical codes. But every class included an hour or more of rehearsing skills to apply those ethical, legal, regulatory guidelines with real challenging client cases.
That was one of my favorite things about it because we weren't asking students just to memorize it. It's really like, how do you apply the legal and ethical guidelines to complex situations that you will face as a marriage and family therapist?
Because many classes will have like, okay, based on this case, write up how you would address it. No, 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 no. This is actually do it with someone role playing the client. And what we're aiming for there is called state dependent learning, which is something deliberate practice uses a lot. And the training in any field, whether you're training to be a soccer player, a musician, a pilot, a firefighter, they use state dependent learning, which means you practice in the same conditions that you will eventually perform in. And we perform therapy with a person in front of us, not with a laptop writing an essay. We want our students to be rehearsing as much as possible with a person in front of them.
I love this. I'm thinking now, as you were talking, I don't know if you tested this when you were designing your curriculum. Is there any optimal division of time, like in a 2-hour class, of how much lecture, how much rehearsal, how much review of tapes? Like,
It's very
yeah,
rough, but it'd be 1 hour of traditional academics. It should be lecture and some discussion and that kind of thing. And then an hour of video review, which starts with expert demonstration videos and gradually moves more and more to the trainees' own videos of their cases. And then also an hour of deliberate practice. That said, we trust our faculty. We do a lot of faculty training. Faculty have a lot of leeway to do more of this or less of that. Something I want to add here, which is unusual about our program, is not only is every therapy session videotaped, every supervision session is videotaped, but every class meeting is videotaped. And our faculty meet every week for an hour with our chief academic officer, Alexandre Vaz, and go over the videos of their teaching and get feedback on their teaching.
I think the deliberate practice supervision residency really prepared me getting feedback from an expert who's watched my tape in a group setting. It's really powerful to see somebody who's watched your tape and said, yeah, this is going well, and this is where you might try something different next week. It's also really helpful if you had something you were curious about. I can go back and watch the recording of my teaching and put a bookmark and send Alex an email that said, hey, I tried this thing at 2 hours and 15 minutes. I bookmarked it. I'd love some feedback on that. Can you watch and let me know if I did that right? So that's really exciting. And it's also great to be able to see your colleagues
yeah,
teaching, which I
mhm,
think is really powerful. Teaching is usually done behind closed doors where there's not a lot of people looking at it. And
yeah.
here we have lots of folks looking at it and getting feedback in a supportive environment with this lens toward consistent improvement and that there's always room for growth. I think that's been really powerful.
I love it. It's like a supercharged learning environment, very, very ripe environment for evolution of our teaching, of our supervision, of our clinical practice. Speaking of teaching, I wanted to ask about asynchronous teaching. Is it even possible to integrate deliberate practice in an asynchronous course? There are several online programs out there, and I have a lot of classes besides practicum and internship when the students start seeing clients that are nearly completely asynchronous with a few live meetings here and there. What are your thoughts on integrating deliberate practice in this online asynchronous format?
Yeah, so Sentio, everything we do is synchronous, almost like 100%, with the exception of homework. That said, we have a number of resources that are good for asynchronous use. And I just put the link in the chat. It's at sentio.org/innovation. And there's a few dozen links on that page to different resources we've created that are all free to use. Professors and other programs can use them however you want. I think they could be worked in pretty well. Likewise, we have a YouTube page. I'll put that in the chat as well. The YouTube page has around 50, 100 videos that, again, are all free to use. And I know professors who use those for asynchronous education.
I have shared those before with colleagues and students, and we're going to put them in the show notes for sure. Any other thoughts on this question?
I think the one challenge with not having a live instructor is that tailored feedback that you can receive in real time, right? Sometimes people will hit the criteria but miss the micro skill of the tone of their voice or the pacing. And so you were able to hit criteria 1, 2, and 3, but here's the micro adjustment I would recommend, and let's try that again. You could miss that opportunity if you're recording it and somebody is giving you feedback, not in real time, but you're still able to get that feedback. I think that's also really powerful.
Okay, I do want to reserve some time to talk about AI before we
Oh,
head
yeah.
out today. There's so much happening in this
Yeah.
space, in the mental health space right now. I know you are doing some research in this space and you're very interested in the utility of it. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts you want to share right off the bat, Tony, on the potential
Yeah.
for AI tools in training.
Yeah, well, it's a bit of a double-edged sword. I just put a link in the chat for our first AI research project, which is now working its way through peer review currently. We have a few more we're about to submit. AI has tremendous value. I was talking with someone earlier today who was using ChatGPT as a training tool, where the ChatGPT was role-playing clients and letting this person practice skills. And sometimes, from what I've seen, ChatGPT can give good performance feedback. Now, it's two-dimensional because it's just written. So there's a lot, like Rocky just said, where tone of voice and pacing, you're not going to get that. ChatGPT does not create a stressful environment the way that a human. Many of us have found that helping clients can sometimes feel stressful because the client is really stressed, and we have a functioning limbic system, and we feel that stress. We're attuned to them. That's a good thing. But we have to learn how to perform while feeling that stress, to not disengage, to not just constantly try to make the client feel better no matter what. We have to be able to tolerate those painful feelings. And it's going to be hard to learn how to tolerate painful feelings while talking with ChatGPT for obvious reasons. I am very positive about the potential role of AI, especially with video avatars and all that. Though there's a double-edged sword to that, which is as AI gets better and better at role-playing a client, it's also getting better and better at being a therapist. And we did a survey recently. We found that half of the people who took the survey said they were already using ChatGPT as a therapist. So I can't prove this, but our data suggests, and I personally think ChatGPT is currently the largest provider of mental health support in the country, bigger than the VA. And just
Wow.
measured in the millions of people getting basically therapy. They
Right.
don't call it therapy, and they don't want to admit
Mhm.
this is going on because they don't want to have to follow HIPAA and all the other things that we have to follow. But I think this is going on as we speak. And so if you go to Reddit, you will see posts of people using ChatGPT for support. So this is something I think about every day, is how do we train our students to have a good career in the future where AI will be providing a lot of services.
Yeah, and also, where do you see deliberate practice claiming space in a
Well,
world where AI has such a central role?
great question. So, what AI is really good at, and where it just beats humans hands down, there's no contest, is knowledge. You will not win a knowledge battle versus ChatGPT. You just can't do it. It's like winning a running race against a car. Like you can't do it. You can't outrun a car, and you will never know as many facts or as much history. ChatGPT just knows the whole everything that's ever been written in a book or the internet. So what that means for us as therapists and professors and students is to focus on where are we relevant. When knowledge becomes less relevant, it's like the Industrial Revolution made physical strength less relevant because all of a sudden there are machines that can do all these things. ChatGPT
Mhm.
is making knowledge just raw like knowledge, less relevant. What is more relevant? The ability to experientially do something, perform as a human being. So to be present, to be empathic as a human being, to have embodied wisdom, not book wisdom, embodied wisdom, a sense of spirituality, a sense of meaning. And I think all this is best learned through practice. Experiential training becomes more and more relevant. And the ability to recite a protocol from memory and follow the 12-step protocol just becomes less relevant.
Yeah, I hear that loud and clear. The power to emote is just something that I now see some human-like avatars that people are testing out there. I'm excited and creeped out at the same time with some of the emoting that's happening with the AI made human figures on video. I was going to ask Rocky and Olivia their thoughts on using AI for training purposes and for therapy as a career. There's so much potential here. Anything that pops up in their minds right now.
Yeah, I've used it in training to design client prompts to use for AI.
Ooh,
I've used
yeah.
AI to design client prompts to test reflective listening or any kind of skill. Sometimes instead of just writing, I'll use it and then I'll be like, I don't really love that. I'm going to modify this and change that. Yeah. Olivia, what about you?
I wouldn't use AI for anything other. I would pretty much use it for the same stuff that I would just Google. For me, it's like a shortcut through Google. And I think when we talked about it in class was when we were talking about diagnoses and stuff like that. You can input a number of things, which is the same thing you would do if you were Googling what's the DSM criteria for generalized anxiety disorder, or these are the symptoms my client has. Everything else we're saying is experiential and human related. If I would Google it, then I might put it into ChatGPT just because it's sometimes faster. But sometimes it doesn't work. I tried to get as specific as possible. Now I'll just go Google it myself. So yeah, if I would Google it, I would use
Yeah.
it. Otherwise, I'm going to a human.
Has anyone tested producing deliberate practice skills or micro skills through GPT?
Yeah.
And how did that go? Was it smart enough for that?
It's a good first draft, kind of how Rocky said. As you learn to prompt it, it gets better and better at first drafts. And then, but you typically have to go in because it usually makes some pretty critical errors and you have to tweak it this way and that way. But it's entirely realistic to think that in a few years, or definitely 10 years, it's not going to be first draft anymore. It's going to be, this is the very early days. I mean, there's already been studies showing, and it's in the link I put, there's a paper there with a lit review. There's been multiple studies that show that ChatGPT can beat human therapists in ratings of empathy on written therapy, as rated by both
Wow.
clients and therapists. There is a question of what are therapists going to do in the future. And I do think that I don't know when. I don't know if it'll be 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years. But at some point, there'll be a human therapist and an AI, and it'll be a treatment team. Because the AI does have certain advantages. Like it's available 24/7 and your human therapist is
Sure.
not. It's
Yeah.
basically free and your human therapist are not. If I say, I'm from this little town in India, it knows that town. It knows what happened in that town 50 years ago. It knows my dialect. It knows all these things that as a human therapist, there's no way you can have that kind of knowledge. I think the two together, given enough time, can make a really strong team. But there's a number of safety issues and safeguards and stuff that have to be worked out.
I would love to see therapists being more active in advisory boards and policy making around the use of AI in the therapy space. I do think we're going to be working side by side in the future. It's in our best interest to work with, not against at this point.
Right now, it's this interesting situation where the AI companies want to pretend it's not happening because they don't want the liability, and therapists don't
Right.
believe it's happening. So
Yeah.
between the two, it's like no one's talking about it, but it is happening. The issue is it's happening so quickly. We're trying to kind of keep up with it as it happens.
I know. It's like drinking water out of a fire hose right
Yeah.
now. I want to say a very big thank you to all of you, our fantastic guests, Dr. Rousmaniere, Rocky, Olivia, for sharing their experiences on deliberate practice and its amazing impact on their teaching and learning. Tony, how can listeners interested in your work reach out to you?
I think the Sentio website, and you can put it in the show notes. And if they want to reach out to me, there's my email and contact information there. But I would encourage listeners to go to our innovation page or go to our YouTube page and watch the free videos. Alex made great video demonstrations of deliberate practice. You know, a lot of this stuff is kind of theoretical until you see it. You know, once you see it, you're like, oh, I get it. And then there's resources that faculty can use. Our goal is not just to build a good program, but to help all the other programs start using these resources. So please take them and use them and let us know what works best for you.
How can listeners interested in your work reach out to you?
Yeah, thank you. I also through the Sentio website would be the best way. Look forward to connecting with folks.
Wonderful.
Rocky, his main job is working as a manager. Is that right, Rocky?
Yeah.
He's very humble, but he has done tremendous work in bringing deliberate practice to a large agency. I would encourage folks who are trying to do that to reach out to Rocky for advice. When I have questions about that, I go to Rocky.
Implementation
Yeah, of course.
consulting right there. I
Yeah,
love
if
it.
you have an
Yeah.
agency and you would like to implement deliberate practice, I would recommend hiring Rocky to do that. He's one of the top people in the world now in terms of experience doing that.
Fantastic. Rocky, you must be so proud. If you are in an agency, like Tony said, and you feel like you're swimming upstream, get some help, and Rocky is your
Yeah.
person to go to. I hope you found today's discussion both enlightening and inspiring. Follow us on the Learning and Teaching Systemic Therapy podcast, wherever you listen to your podcasts. We have more exciting episodes coming up every month. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time.